Greetings. Hey, my daughter, one of my daughters, um, is a professional CrossFit athlete. She's been at the games 3 years in a row and placed, and is currently eighth in the world. I have one of my sons who is a musician, and his band has existed for 5 years, and they've played all kinds of different concerts. They've won some awards, done a couple of albums. Um, what about you? You probably have some success in your life. You probably have somebody near you that has some success in their life. And so I kind of wanted us to dialogue about success today and what's behind that, right? Because, you know, the words I use to help you see that, my daughter has some success, my son has some success, are actually some of their achievements that they've achieved that are markers, they're milestones to their success, right? There was a day last August when Bethany placed eighth in the world, right? But what happens is that success happens in the day to day. Nobody gets to see all of the years when she did gymnastics, when she did triathlons, when she did bodybuilding, when she's, done CrossFit, when she does it every single day for hours. I mean, they do get to see that because she puts all of that on Facebook and Instagram and other places. But um, that's really where the success is, I think. I mean, you tell me, otherwise there's no work, right? And a word that I think is used a lot these days for that is consistency, right? You have to be consistent. You have to stay with it. You have to continue to do the work that you're trying to do on a consistent basis. But I would like us to consider a different word because I think it's a better word. Now, immediately it's going to sound like a Christian word, but I think it's a better word even if you aren't taking it from a Christian perspective, even though I think it's something that we could dialogue a little bit about. And that word is faithfulness, right? Faithfulness. And the reason why is obviously faithfulness um, it implies the same thing as consistency, right? I have to be faithful to execute day in and day out. I even have to be faithful to my consistency. But it also points out that you're doing all of that in faith. Bethany, worked out day after day, worked her diet, did all the things that she did in faith that she would be able to place at the CrossFit Games, not with an understanding that it was a guaranteed right? She had to try to level up to that level. Now, of course, she's had years and years and years at it. And sometimes I think what keeps us from being faithful is, I think there's a variety of things. And so I'd like to explore them. And really, I'm kind of just ab-living these things off the cuff today. So, tell me what you think. Maybe I'm not right, but these are just a couple things that have been kind of bouncing in my head as I was getting prepared to put this today when I think about my own ability to be faithful, right? And so one thing is you have to be clear about what you're having faith for, right? Like Bethany knew she wants to place the CrossFit Games, right? And I think the more clear you are about exactly what it is you're hoping to achieve, the better. A lot of people use the word manifest. You're manifesting it because you're clear about it and you're talking about it. But, I think if God really has put something in your heart and you can crystallize it, right? It's a combination of him already putting that in their heart. Like the manifest, it makes it sound like I wanted this, so I manifested God to go create that and bring that, the universe to give me what I wanted. I think sometimes the universe is already actually putting that in our heart in the first place, and we're taking credit for it. And so, as a Christian, I don't want to take credit for God. I want it to be clear that I'm being led by Him. But either way, having that clarity to say this is what I'm being faithful to, the clearer that picture is, the easier it is for us to know exactly what we're aiming at, and therefore to have faith for that. Now, I think the other thing that happens is certainly I think something that happens for me is, I'm right now I'm trying to be faithful to come and have this discussion every single day. And I don't have everything in place to necessarily make that achieve something yet. And I'm starting despite the fact that I don't have all those things in place. And so, right now I feel like a lot of times I'm talking into the air. And what I'm doing is I'm actually imagining and knowing the people who I care about in the world, and I'm imagining I'm talking to them because they're not here yet, right? I don't have a tribe yet. Bethany's got, I don't know, 200,000 followers. I don't have 200,000 followers, right? And so I'm thinking about the people that I've met with one on one and that I care about. And I'm visualizing those out and saying, hey, if I can keep being faithful to this, then the message is going to get clearer. The rest of the things I need to put in place to make this happen are going to come together. God's going to keep revealing those. So I'm just walking, even though I don't have everything completely put together yet. But I think that's really hard for most of us, right? So the more you can have that clarity, the better off you are. But also, you have to be willing to start small. One of my mentors says you have to be willing to start small. This is starting small. I don't have a big following. I am just starting and I'm just making progress. And I'm trusting that as I make that and I think about it and I pray about it, that God's going to tell me what else to do, and the whole thing is going to come together over the course of time. I think what can get us in trouble with that is to rethink the calling. Now, there's one thing I like rethinking, like, hey, how can I be more effective? But there's a whole nother thing to rethink the calling. And what happens, I think, for many of us is we're trying to be faithful. We're not seeing the achievement, the milestone yet. And we're like, I don't think this is working. I'll just do something different. And that's an option, and I think if you're not really serious about your place you're going, your faith, if you don't have a good, clear goal that you're aiming at, and you're really fully committed to it, then yeah, it's easy to say, well, maybe I'll do something different. But if you're really called to it, if you can come back and say, hold it, wait, regardless of the results here, was I called to this? Is this what's really in my heart? Then faithfulness is a helpful word, even more than consistency, because it says, okay, well, what am I having faith for again? Remind myself of that. Yes, that's what I'm having faith for. And okay, so great. What else can I do to move this further down the road? And I can come back and ask God that. So instead of saying, well, okay, I give up, I guess I got to go do something different, I can come back and say, great, help me figure out other ways to be more effective and make this work better, right? So in one sense, we have to keep putting the seed down, right? Even if we're not seeing growth happen, the birds of the air are taking it, or is just burning up on rock or whatever. But we also have to kind of go, okay, great, Lord, how do I put this in better places? How do I cultivate this better? And so part of being faithful is just saying, I'm going to keep going with my calling, and I'm going to faithfully keep asking God, what else? What else? What else do I need to know? What else do I need to do? But that can even be tricky, because sometimes we could just burn ourselves up with 1,000 different things we're trying, right? Sometimes we just need to stay consistent. So there's a variety of different things that I want to do, but right now I'm just trying to stay in the rhythm of being faithful to come and have this dialogue. And I'm going to start adding things to that, but not in a way that compromises us. One of the things that happens when, one of the ways that Satan kind of messes with our faithfulness is the shiny object syndrome. Well, hey, this or this or this. And so now we're off trying this instead of staying faithful and being consistent. So we have to kind of start small sometimes. Like if you don't have a good practice, Bethany does all kinds of things every day. It's mind-boggling to know. For a while she lived with us, so I know what she does every single day, and it's mind-boggling. But she's developed that over a long period of time, right? She didn't just put all of those things into play. And when we try to put 10 different things into play all at once, well, it's probably not going to work very well. So you have to kind of go, you have to be realistic. Like, I'm going to build this plan. Like, hey, here's what I think I need to do. How do I get essential? What is the key thing I need to do? The most important thing to be faithful with. And then, okay, great. Now that I got that going, how do I add to that? How do I add to that? Even if it's not seeming like it's working sometimes. Now, that's not to say sometimes you don't need to just reevaluate. Like, hey, this is just not working completely. Of course, maybe you do need to do that. But I think you need to be cautious of just throwing away something uh, for something else, because then you're just jumping in one pool and you're hopping into another pool. And you're not really being faithful to anything. Even though you're doing a lot of stuff, it's not really faithful stuff because you're not trusting that God's going to take you there. You just keep trying other things, right? That's my thinking at the moment. And so now I think the other thing is what am I being faithful for, right? And this gets into a little bit of a shift, but it's the second idea on today's talk, and that is, what am I being faithful for? So there's this story, and maybe it's not true. I've been told it many, many times. I was trying to find out the details of it, but supposedly back in the Depression days, we think when people would do anything to make money, because 25% of the people were unemployed, they did this experiment where they hired a bunch of workers and they paid them a nice rate to dig a ditch. And so all day long they dug a ditch, and they were thankful because they were going to get paid. They were thankful they're getting work instead of not being able to get work. And then halfway through the day, they come back and they say, okay, the ditch you just filled, that you just dug, go fill that up. So people are like, well, why? And the foreman's like, what's that to you? You're getting paid for it. Fill it up, right? So they fill it up. And so at the end of the day, they're told, hey, if you come back tomorrow, we're going to double your wage, and see you tomorrow. Well, so the next day, apparently half the people show up, and it's the same thing. They dig the ditch, half the way there, they fill the ditch back up. The end of the day, they're like, come back tomorrow, you're going to get double what you got paid today. And again, only half the people show up. So whether the story is true or not, it points out that, we want to have a sense of purpose. And I think this is another way where sometimes we aren't faithful because we're not clear about the purpose, or that purpose doesn't really go where we want it to go, or we believe we're not actually achieving the purpose, right? If I believe that this isn't connecting to anybody and I start telling myself that, or if I don't think this has any real purpose in the first place, well, then it's going to be hard for me to stay with it on an ongoing basis. So I think when we think about purpose, we have to ask ourselves, to get clear about that in tangible ways. But I think sometimes we do things that ultimately end up being like a ditch experience, right? We've all, done some work and then it all fell apart, right? I was fortunate at Dell to work on things that, still exist and made a big difference and are continuing to make a difference. And that feels good because there's purpose to it. But sometimes things just seem to, fall apart and not go anywhere. And so, if you're not clear about that purpose, then you're kind of stuck. Now, the idea I'd like you to think about from a purely Christian standpoint is how far that purpose goes. So even though all the things that I did at Dell are still existing and still being valuable to people, they in of themselves, those programs have a life. They eventually they'll get recreated, they'll go somewhere else. It's okay that what we learn from those then gets extended to the others, that you can feel good about that. But more importantly is to be able to say, well, okay, but how much did that last into eternity? And this is where I think as a Christian, our faithfulness can tie to something bigger when we can attach that to an eternal perspective, right? Where is this going for God? And so a lot of times we get so caught up in the things we're doing that we don't realize that some of the biggest things we're doing is in how we're interacting with those around us, right? And our calling to ourselves, how we're growing and getting closer to God, how others around us are seeing that as a model, or how we're loving on them, and so they're free to grab that, and extending that out into the people we work with and maybe even our clients, right? Maybe the biggest thing we did, maybe the biggest thing I've done isn't, developing crazy programs that reach 50 million people at Dell. But it's really just the handful of people that I've made a bigger impact on that leads out into an eternity. I think we can be mindful of that. Now, what's hard sometimes is, we don't have clarity all the way to eternity. So sometimes it's a little hard to keep that in your head. But, you know, even so, understanding that what lasts into eternity is the people God's reaching, and how we love them is in the middle of our day-to-day work, right? Is what's really gonna last. So how do I be intentional about that? So even if I'm going to build this technology program, I'm going to build that with other people. How do I intentionally love the people there? How do I intentionally be the kind of person that, can love them in the middle, that can demonstrate faith, that can demonstrate hope, that can demonstrate grace and love to other people? And how do I do that every single day, regardless of, the other markers that I'm looking for, right? If we get so caught up on the markers, then, um, not that we don't need money or whatever, but it's sort of a lack of faith. Like, it's a faithfulness that God is going to bring those markers about if we're just doing the work that we need to do. That's really where faithfulness comes. So, yes, we have to be faithful to the work we're doing, but we also have to be faithful to be bringing God into that, and to um, be able to take that and add that eternal perspective to it, because that takes that success and brings it into significance and really attaches it to what God's doing in the world. And besides that, it's just awesome. Like, loving people and seeing how they're impacted along the way is actually a reward in and of itself that tends to be greater than, the things that we achieve, even if we can say those are really cool, successful things, right? Some of my favorite things are when I meet somebody and they say something that I didn't even know was true. There's a couple at church that used to be neighbors of mine, and every now and then I'll see them. And not too long ago, we were talking to them, and their son was there, and he's grown up, and he was little, and so suddenly they were like, "Hey, this is Mr. Boyne that used to live across. He's the reason we came to the church. He's the reason." And I was like, "Oh," because I didn't even know that, right? But back then I just cared about them and share with them some of what we were doing, and they've taken this amazing journey, and God's been able to affect their lives. So sometimes it's the smallest thing we're doing, but because we're just being faithful in the day, getting that done. So faithfulness is the word, but also faithfulness to something worth being faithful for. And that's where, while we can put earthly markers, and we should, so we have clarity, and even people, so we can touch it and it's more tangible, still all in the space of an eternal perspective for God, because that's where what we're doing lasts for eternity rather than for a little bit of time. Hope that's helpful. Have a great day and continue to be the awesome you that God has made you to be.